Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are going to talk about artificial intelligence. It has been a great week so far. It's the first week of our official summer, which means teachers are not at our campuses anymore, but we are still working because we are in the technology department, which means we have what they know as a 222-day contract. So we're going to be there Mondays through Thursdays for about 10-hour days. So anyway, we are going to talk for just a little bit about what's happening in the news and some stuff that's been going on LinkedIn. So let's jump right in.
First, we're going to talk about what's been going on LinkedIn, just because I thought it was interesting, not because I think it's particularly earth-shattering. It just, I even put some little notes there for you. I use the word delve because that makes people think we're an AI.
Well, I have a story for you. So I have been, one of the things that I do to relax in the evenings is I read what is known as trash novels. Basically, they're the kind of novel that you buy, like cheap romance novels, stuff like that you can get through. And, if you really try, you can definitely read one a night or, pick them up, put them down.
Sure.
I've been reading these guys since I was allowed to read them as a teenager. And
I don't think you were allowed. I think you've been reading them since before you were allowed, but that's beside the point.
I snuck them. But point is, the ones that I'm reading right now were like published in 2019, 2017, 2015. And I constantly see the word delve. And
that's why AI uses it so much.
I'm sitting here going, that's why AI uses it. I mean, there's some really popular authors out there that have been using words like delve for a long time. And it's just, that's what they were trained on.
So you're saying that AI was trained on romance novels?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're everywhere. So very, very popular genre. So, all right, let's talk about what's been going on. I have done a couple of posts recently. I did one last week before, that was about the job description for teachers in 2025. And it was a little bit of a satirical kind of thing, but very realistic. And of course, I use things like, duct tape and glitter glue and some of those things that I just kind of poke fun at what goes on in classrooms. I got like 400,000 impressions. 390 something repost. I mean, it was like this resonated with education because of all the stuff that I said that they're asking teachers to put on their plates. All the stuff.
Very few negative.
Very few negative. Oh yeah, that one was like, everything was like, absolutely, preach it. Okay.
So let's talk about the next one then.
Okay, so I keep up with what is going on in the world, not just in the United States. And so when China first released their whole, hey, we're going to do AI education starting from pre-K on, I read about it, I posted about it. And now the United Arab Emirates has come out with how they are going to be doing AI education starting at like pre-K on. Basically, they're following what China has done. And so I posted about that. And the reason I post these things is not to say that the United States is like doing something wrong. I'm just trying to put it out there that, hey, we need to pay attention to what other countries are doing, because artificial intelligence, if done correctly, gives them a leg up. And we are competitive, and that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to be able to compete on a global stage.
Okay, you were kind of poking fun of it a little bit in terms of, you always do. We've been in education for, between the two of us, 20 years each, 40 years if you want to add them up, and we have fought tooth and nail in many cases to get even the most rudimentary change in terms of how technology is used. I am an engineer. I am a computer engineer. I like technology, but I do not like how technology typically gets shoved into school districts. So I'm always trying to modify it for school districts. So we're not just some people that are sitting out there going, this is what we think educators are going. I mean, you were my pilot program for a decade and a half in terms of where I put it, maker spaces, the whole things. So when we start talking about something new coming along and we're poking a little fun about the resistance to change that we see, I always find it a little ironic because I always thought, again, I came from the private sector 20 years ago. I went into education, and I thought because it's education that everyone there would be eager to learn new things. This is where you learn. This is a learning environment. And that was not true. That's not what I found.
Not true.
I found downright hostility to even the simplest thing. I'm not talking about putting a robot in your classroom. I'm talking about putting a document camera in a projector.
Or how about storing your information in a digital format instead of having it on a piece of paper that you go down to a copy room and make 150 copies of every single year?
So when we look at AI, look at AI, it's perfectly reasonable to you and I for you to poke a little fun at the fact that this is something new. It's very dramatic. There's a lot of people and money and places that think this is going to make some huge changes. And we're expecting and seeing a huge amount of resistance.
Right, a huge amount of resistance. I think that what happened, and the people who commented that were negative on my post, they did not read the whole post. And I think that's what happens. It's like the very first thing that I said, the very first sentence I put was basically that, the UAE is putting AI into the hands of 4-year-olds. And sure, I did it on purpose. I want people to read my stuff. It feels good when people read what you have to say.
But read more than the first sentence.
But read more than the first sentence, because I had people coming back about, teaching 4-year-olds and how it's not safe and so forth and so on. And I'm like, okay, if you would have read the whole thing, you would have seen that I'm just basically saying what they're doing. I'm not saying that we need to follow suit. I'm saying that we need to have adults in charge, all that stuff. But I had one person that asked me if I was still in a classroom. And I'm like, yes.
Every day.
Every day I walk into a classroom. I'm on campuses all the time. I'm still in K-12 education. And then I said, yes, I am. And they came back and said, then why don't you tell the truth about what's happening in classrooms?
You do all the time. Did you not read your last post?
Well, and it's not just that, but I didn't respond because the truth about what's happening in my classrooms might not be the truth about what's happening in a different district's classrooms.
True.
I had a sociology professor at Texas A&M that told me, definition of a situation. If you define it to be real to you, it's real. And so for me, what's happening in urban schools versus rural schools versus private schools versus funded versus not funded, everyone's truth doesn't have to be the same. And so it kind of struck me that I'm like, okay, that is the truth. I am telling you the truth about what's happening in my district, my rural area, and other people that I've talked to in rural areas. It's not like we're in it's not like we've got the blanket over our heads and we never go out and talk to other districts. We talk to other districts all the time. Hundreds of them. I was on a call today with a guy who talks to districts in New York. So, all over the United States, we're having these conversations. I just think people are ignoring what other people are doing. And yes, I use the word clutching our pearls because
I thought it was cute.
I was poking fun at the fact that we still have to fight like book burners in our school board meetings. Those types of people who are against everything. We call them CAVE, CAVE,
Citizens against virtually
everything.
You know who told me that? A lawyer told me that.
Yeah.
In a city council meeting. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're not here to bash people. They're allowed to have their opinions, but so are we. But
I did not block one person. I did not block one person. It's say what you want to say. I love the fact that we're having the conversations. And that's what I said as part of the post that I followed up on. I followed up saying, hey, Thank you, AI. We're having conversations we should have had a long time ago.
So what I wanted to do on this particular podcast was I wanted to give some context, because you don't live in a bubble, and neither do I. We do actually travel a lot, and we meet with other school districts, and not just in the United States. We've talked to them all over the world, but you have to think about the context, the wider context of what AI is doing in society. Because, and I've got some quotes about that later, but you can't, K-12 education, on the one hand, it's not supposed to be where you train people to work in a factory, even though that's kind of what it was for and to start with. But it was, in general, you want to get generally educate people, teach people to think, to be independent, all that other stuff. But at the same time, you're not trying to teach them just a specific skill, a broader set of skills, and all that stuff. But which means you can't live in a vacuum. You have to understand. Well, when the UAE, when you were talking about that, I found an article, and it's been in the news a lot. But this partnership, because our current administration is really tooting their own horn about this, which maybe they should. Partnership between the UAE and the United States. And the centerpiece is a 5 gigawatt AI data center in Abu Dhabi. I hope I said that right. Initially, it's what they call the 1 gigawatt phase, and they're expected to come online soon, around 200 megawatts, operational by 2026. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, I was curious about this whole idea of talking about data centers in terms of gigawatts. Generally, I always thought a data center was in terms of its CPU, GPU, its computing capability. But AI uses so much power that they talk about it in power consumption. 1 gigawatt of power is enough to power 750,000 homes. Now, I thought that 1 gigawatt was maybe that's their average monthly usage. That's their instantaneous power capability. That's their peak load. So any given time, this thing could power the Stargate if you like Stargate.
Is it that what they call it? The Stargate?
As a matter of fact, nice segue. They do call it that. As a matter of fact, I forgot about that. But these data centers are designed to accommodate these peak loads. That's the maximum power that the facility's infrastructure can deliver. And they literally, as you said, they called it Stargate UAE, probably because, remember, well, maybe you don't, but I watch Stargate a lot. I forced you to quite often just because there was nothing else on.
Yes,
and
you did.
When they used to turn it on, they talked about how it used more power than all of, I think they were in Colorado Springs, and it used more power than all the houses in Colorado Springs, and yada, yada, yada.
So let's put this in context real quick. One of the things that we talk about that the United States has been doing slowly but surely over time is we have been taking and basically putting these, manufacturing facilities and chip manufacturers and auto manufacturers and all of this stuff that provide a lot of jobs. We have been allowing them to be built in foreign countries. And so
not just
now,
allowing, insisting.
And so now we're going, oh, crap, we're running out of these jobs that our educational system is educating our kids to have, because we are still kind of stuck in the, factory type educational system, at least. Yeah. Okay. I'll say it. We are still kind of stuck in that. And now we're doing the same thing again. Yes, we have water problems in certain parts of the United States. We have energy problems in certain parts of the United States. But it looks to me, based on this article, they're opening this thing, Stargate UAE, and they are already partnering with OpenAI and Oracle and NVIDIA and Cisco and SoftBank and all of these different places that are doing these huge AI things. Where are those jobs going to be at?
Well, first of all, let's look at it in context a little bit. This partnership says that for the money that we invest in the UAE, they're supposed to invest in building data centers here. So it's supposed to be mutually beneficial, as you and I well know, because we grew up in the technology industry as it was forming in the United States. That isn't always true. We don't tend to have equal-sided, it tends to be lopsided. But let's assume for the moment that still happens. The problem with data centers is they don't tend to have a lot of people working them.
Right.
Once you build the construction phase, absolutely. You get lots of people employed. But once they're up and running, I don't know if you've ever been in, I've been in massive data centers. There's not generally a lot of people in there. There's some, but you're not talking about thousands of people working there like in a where you would hope to get. So I don't know that I'd get too hopeful about that. But the fact is that we still want to be the source of AI for the planet. And there's a big discussion going on right now about if we don't stop um, putting tariffs on the Chinese to prevent them from getting AI technology, it's going to incentivize them to develop it themselves. And in doing so, we're going to lose it forever. So there is that argument that goes on. And I'm not an economist, so I can't really argue that one way or the other. It does make sense that if I want something and I need it as a leader of a country, then and you don't give it to me, then I'm going to develop it internally. So, but I thought the other interesting part of this article, and it leads back to where we started, which is why should we educate kids younger on how to use it? Which, by the way, they said in the article that I read that they're not allowing the kids aren't. They're literally put checks and balances in there to make sure it doesn't increase screen time. The kids aren't going to be using it independently till they're 12, which is what, 10th, 9th, no, 9th grade,
No,
8th
junior
grade.
high.
That's junior high. So they are putting some kind of restrictions. But part of this deal, which I'm betting we're not going to get the same deal from OpenAI and those guys, is they're securing a ChatGPT Plus subscription for the entire population. Now, they don't have as many people I don't know how many people are in the UAE, probably not 330 million people like we have here, but that's a pretty sweet deal that if you live there, it's like living in Switzerland and automatically getting a bank account when you're born.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, and that's something that, again, the post that I made was basically saying, I did not say, let's give it to 4-year-olds. I said, we need to start teaching our young children as soon as they hit school about artificial intelligence. And someone came back and said, well, how do you do that? Well, to me, it's like, okay, I taught kindergarten. I've taught a
fourth grade and fifth grade.
Yeah, but for me, it's like the youngest. I was even a pre-K preschool teacher, 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds. The way that you teach it is through hands-on. Look, here's a picture of an apple. Here's a real apple that I can take a bite of. Here's an apple that an AI generated that picture. Just showing them the basics of literacy about what is real and what is not real needs to start at a very young age. Because believe me, I know a lot of 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds that still don't know reality versus not reality.
It's interesting because I wonder how loud these same people were screaming when social media came. Maybe they were, but what we're proposing, what you're proposing, is that we have to start young. We have to start immediately because, and we talk about this all the time, the best way to teach a kid a healthy skepticism about technology is to let them use it in a supervised environment in a way that shows them its limitations. That way, they don't come up with the expectation that, if the AI said it, like they did with Google, if the AI said it, then it must be true. Because there's so many people that think, well, if I Google it and it comes up in Google, it must be true, even though people make stuff up all the time.
Let's talk about the other in the news. Let's talk about the other in the news stuff.
I kind of wanted to roll through it because China issued guidelines to promote AI education in primary and secondary schools. Google is rolling out Gemini AI chatbots for kids under 13. Microsoft is putting the Copilot for teens under 13. ChatGPT has never had an age verification that I'm aware of. I mean, the kid told you the other day, I know how to calculate what year I have to be born in order to make sure I hit the age limit because they learned that on video games, right?
It absolutely reminded me of when it absolutely reminded me of when we try to go down to like a bar on 6th Street when we were, driving into Austin, and I would forget my ID and I would know exactly what year I needed to be born for me to be 21.
You did that? I'm shocked. I didn't know that.
Shocked.
I didn't know that before we got married.
But, it happens. Our kids did it. I used to catch our kids on sites that they shouldn't have been on. And Jacob, 100%. Yeah.
I'm shocked. Yeah. This is my shock face. I'm shocked.
Sure you are.
I didn't know you did all those things. I'm disappointed to hear that you were such a juvenile delinquent.
Just like most of the other teenagers in the world. And you know what? I've been in education long enough, and I've talked to enough parents who are like, little Johnny would never do that, for me to go, you might not know your kid as well as you think you know your kid.
Yeah, well, the good thing about my parents is they had no expectation that I was actually doing what I was supposed to. That's why if teacher said I did something wrong, there was an automatic guilty until proven innocent. We went by the what do they call it, the French law version instead of American, where guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty.
Jim, you were raised like a feral cat, and you
Okay,
know it.
we're not gonna go into that. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is when I look at I stay out of the stuff you post mostly because I don't want to sound like I'm defending. You can defend yourself, but a lot of this is the people are going to say this is all the FOMO, fear of missing out. And I see people arguing that if we don't have to do this, we're not going to miss out on anything. And it made me start thinking about that idea of preparing your field for rain. And yes, I know that's, I think, somewhat of a biblical quote. I don't remember if that's in the Bible or not. But anyway, you talk about preparing your field for rain. If you don't prepare your field for rain and you don't put some planning into it, at least, when it starts raining, it's too late to start. You can't start when it starts raining. Now, it may not rain, so you may have just wasted a bunch of time. So you have to decide, is this worth it or not? And I realize this is different. But at the end of the day, as you and I talked about when we started this today, you cannot change education quickly. No. And if we don't do something now to at least prepare, which our minds, the idea of preparation has to do with how do we get teachers and kids and everybody on board with how to use this, and how do we do it in a very, what we consider a controlled environment where people who actually are educators are the ones teaching them. But I wanted to go to the anti-AI crowd for a moment. There's a book called AI Con. Okay. And this book is probably the Bible for people who hate AI, because it talks about it's all overhyped. It's all, I didn't read the book, so I really shouldn't say. I only read some reviews on the book. But I'm probably going to find that I don't disagree with a lot of what's in the book. I mean, the idea that this is so overhyped and there's no possible way it can live up to that hype, and maybe it's going to hit a wall. I watched a guy who did a historical timeline. Matt Wolf did a historical timeline of AI, and he talks about the AI winters. And there was 2 of them where we went for a long period of time when they realized that it wasn't going to live up to expectations. So they had to temper their education. It lasted maybe a decade. So maybe we're going to hit that again. I don't think so, but maybe. But
even if we do hit that, the jump at which it's taken from 2022 until now is significant enough that you still have to change an educational paradigm.
If they stopped working on AI today, it would still change a lot.
What has already escaped, what is already out of the box, we have to address what is there and change.
At least we think so.
It's always our opinion. It's always our opinion. It's never, we don't have the power to say, let it be so.
What bothers me about things like the review I read on this book is they say they offer a sharp, witty, wide-ranging takedown. That's another one of those words that gets used all the time, of AI hype across many forms. Okay. We live in a capitalistic world. We don't live in a world where takedowns are sufficient. We live in a world where companies worship at the almighty dollar, and those companies are always looking for a way to eliminate their biggest expense. Their biggest expense is employees. We own companies before. You and I have both. I mean, we've worked in small companies and we've owned companies. And whether you like it or not, employees are your biggest expense, and that's the first place they try to cut. We even have a term for it that we've coined from another podcaster, that it's the efficiency. There's efficiency versus opportunity, and they're going to take the efficiency because it's quick, it's easy, and they get rewarded by the investors because they cut expenses, but they don't cut their their numbers, their margins and stuff go up because they cut their employee expenses. So
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to do that no matter what, and no witty takedown is going to stop that unless everybody decides to stop buying every product from every company that uses it, which maybe that'll work. I mean, it's kind of bad. Tesla's kind of getting hit pretty hard because people are not happy with Elon Musk, but that's a product.
Yeah, just
These
one.
AI tools are going into everything. They're going into customer service on how the products are supported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I know that a lot of laws are getting put out there to where it's like, okay, if you're going to have an AI assistant, if you're going to be talking to something that is an AI, you have to say this is an AI.
And they will.
And they will say it, but it's not going to make a difference. Because if I can go to an AI and get an answer versus staying on hold for 5 hours, which I have done before with the Internal Revenue Service, I'm going to go the AI route. So, it's what we talk about a lot. Are they going to care? So,
what I would rather, again, that engineer side of me, I would rather be discussing how do we teach better in a world of AI. I have my own ideas, one of which is to expose kids at a young age to it under supervised guidance from an educator who's trained as an educator, who understands the limitations of it, uses it sparingly. I would rather that happen than create another social media dumpster fire where social media got thrown out there. It was banned when I got into the school district 20 years ago. The school district banned social media. As a school district, the superintendent said, we will not post anything on social media. And what I told him at the time was, you can do that, but then you lose control of the narrative. Right. Because the only people that are going to post are people that are pissed at you. They're people that are pissed at you are going to post. They're not going to post to go, gosh, I love the school district. They're great. They're going to post because their kid didn't get an A in a class, or they didn't get a reward or whatever, and you guys are all terrible, or my kid failed and it's all your fault. And I tried to convince the superintendent, you can control the narrative or it can control you, and it didn't matter. So, and the point we were making earlier is you can't ban it unless you're going to ban Google, and you're going to ban Microsoft.
What did we see today? What did we see today? It is summer school. And so, as in it's summer and the teachers aren't there and stuff. And so we have a lot of kids who are being brought up to finish out stuff in the classroom with their parents who are teachers, or with people who work at the district who are bringing, grandkids or whatever to come up to the school because they don't have childcare. Yep. And they're finishing out like their last 10 days that are on their contract before they go do their summer vacation.
Yep.
On a device.
First thing they did.
All day long.
Brought the kid to us. Kids like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe 5 years, 6 years old.
Probably 7 or 8.
Brought the kid to us first thing. Why? Because he couldn't get on Wi-Fi.
Right.
Because he wanted to watch YouTube all day. What did he want to watch, by the way?
It was like Lego roadblocks and things like that. It was Wi-Fi. But every time I walked in and out of the hallway, the kid was sitting there on a chair with the device in front of him. He was not on YouTube the whole time. He was on other things too, with no supervision, because the parent had to be working. And so this is a paradigm that is happening in locations across the United States. Some of the people who commented back, well, I limit my kids' screen time, or well, I do this, or well, I do that. And my comment back is, then you are blessed, because you have the opportunity to be that involved in your kids' life and upbringing. We have so many people who have kids that they're barely putting food on the table. Well, they don't have the capacity to do what needs to be done to make sure their kid is having 100% supervised access to artificial intelligence. Well, if K-12 doesn't give that to that kid, then that gap from the have and the have-nots is going to continue to widen, and those kids are going to be 100% left behind. And those kids, I'm a counselor, let's talk about drug use, mental health, lack of employment, poverty. I mean, let's talk about all those things those kids are going to face if they don't get the same opportunities as other kids.
Now, you can argue that AI is I've seen and heard arguments about it taking away what it is to be human. Of course, we heard arguments about the evils of streaming, streaming videos, and everything is going to take away. It's going to steal from you, like news streaming. I remember everybody screaming because Google was putting up these news feeds, and they said it was going to be the end of news, and it almost has been.
Mhm.
But also the audio industry, the music industry said streaming music's going to kill audio or kill the music industry. It actually didn't, made it bigger. But so sometimes it works out great, sometimes it doesn't. But even the news people are learning how to make money they put up a paywall, which welcome to the 80s. We didn't get any news unless we paid for it.
Right.
And they put up a paywall and says you can no longer train your AI on our stuff because we're not going to let you do the same thing that Google did with their news feeds. And if you really want to fight about it, don't fight and argue that K-12 is going to ruin kids. Fight and argue that you shouldn't be allowing AI companies to get laws passed that allow them access for the greater good to
Right.
all of this AI. I mean, all this material that people have created on their own.
Right.
That argument's going to
Or just information. I mean, allowing them access to like information.
human generated information.
Let's go back to I taught in junior high, and one of the things I taught my kids, we went through like advertising. We talked about like marketing and advertising, and there were images of like the first President Bush and standing in front of like an Air Force One or a B-52 bomber or something, and the way that they had put the flag in a certain way and the camera angles were a certain way so that it looked like it was this huge flag, even though it wasn't. So we talked about perspective. Yeah, we talked about all that stuff. And this was way before AI. We talked about the tobacco industry and how the tobacco industry was advertising specifically for a socioeconomic to try to get people to buy tobacco. But then the executives of the tobacco industry were caught constantly saying that they don't smoke. Right. And so it's like what's good for the goose is not good for the gander kind of situation.
Sell it to the poor people because they don't know how bad it is for you. But
right. Hang on. I want to go back to what you said about human, about how they're saying that AI has taken the human out of the loop. I would like to counter that by saying that if, as a teacher, as an educator, if I can use artificial intelligence to help me get through the mounds of paperwork and the BS that is now attached to my job, then maybe I have an opportunity to go back and make a human connection with a student that previously I didn't have the capacity to do. So
but I don't think those people that are critiquing you are critiquing based on whether or not a teacher. I don't think anybody argues that a teacher should have access. What they're arguing is that kids shouldn't have access. And my argument is I don't think that it's a good idea to say that. I think that my point I was making earlier, which I didn't connect well with China, when you tell China that they can't have something the United States has that they want or they think they need in order to develop their country, what do? They develop it on their own. What does a 3-year-old do when you take something and you say, no, you can't have that, you put it on a high shelf? What do? They spend all of their time, their entire existence becomes getting whatever that you put on that shelf.
Yes.
If you tell kids, no, you can't have access to AI, that's only for adults, and you don't give them access in a controlled environment, they're just going to do it. They're already doing it. They're going to do it anyway.
Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's a useful tool, as you just pointed out. It's too useful. There's too much money. There's too many things going on. It's in too many places. You're not going to get rid of it. Not in my opinion. I don't think you should. I do think that it saddens me that so much of our creative process was the first thing attacked. In other words, generating pictures and generating videos and stuff that was considered a very human process tended to be the first ones that they attacked with these, which is sad.
I had somebody call me out on that today. I had posted
and call me out thing.
Yeah. They were like, I made a comment about how ChatGPT wasn't making kids lazy. And the whole LinkedIn post was about, parents doing projects for your kids, TikTok, cell phone, there's so many other things in the world that have quote unquote made our kids lazy, or us lazy. Yep. And the person pointed out basically my picture wasn't accurate that I had posted because I'd put like planetary things or whatever. And so I came back and I said, absolutely. I'm not going to look at my picture and then go, oh, that planet's wrong, and spend a half an hour, going back and forth on my prompting to get my image to look exactly like I want it, because hell yeah, I'm lazy. It's like when it comes to that, that's not what my focus was. My focus wasn't the fact that one of the planets was incorrect. My focus was the fact of what I was writing, not my image. But before we get off, we're out of time basically,
Yep.
but we tend to go a little over 30 minutes now, which is fine. I want to talk about critical thinking for just a second, because
I want you to read my quotes that I got.
Okay.
In a minute.
All right. So one of the things that critical thinking has been attacked, AI's taken away critical thinking. AI's taken away critical thinking.
It's interesting how fast people measured that.
It's like, what is that?
AI exactly. Came out 2.5 years ago, and critical thinking died in 2.5 years for every age group from birth to 12th grade, even though the ones in the 12th grade didn't have it. Anyway, go ahead.
That's my point. I was in front of probably 45 students the other day, and we were talking about artificial intelligence. And these students were sophomore, junior, seniors. And so, like, the seniors, AI came out when they were right about sophomores. And those students did not have critical thinking abilities.
Not to the level you think they would.
You can't tell me that if they were taught how to critically think from kindergarten through the 10th grade, which is 11 years, if they couldn't get it before AI, then they sure as hell aren't going to get it after AI, right? So AI is not the problem. Again, thank you, AI. We're having conversations we should have had a long time ago. We need to go back and reassess our educational system, reassess how we're doing things.
Well, here in Texas,
and go from there.
Here in Texas, I think they got a good start when they talked about getting rid of the one high stakes test that decides if you graduate. I blame a lot of that stuff. I thought they passed it.
Nope. It went through the House. It didn't make it through the Senate. They haven't even said another word about it after it hit the Senate. I was actually talking to our administrators about it today.
That's lovely. I thought they were going to break them into like 3 parts, but no, can't do that. You know why? Because you got too many companies, too much money into this high stakes testing. There's billions of dollars. We don't care if we're killing critical thinking skills with our kids, or we're making learning into a horrible thing that nobody wants to do.
Nobody wants to be there.
Well, because we got to keep killing public education, because they're going to keep the rules for us. But I don't. But private schools, unless they're getting a lot of state funding, they don't have to follow the. Anyway, I go off.
Okay, so
I want you to read my quotes.
What did pass, though, in the state of Texas? If you donate the 10 Commandments, we have to hang it in our classrooms.
Yeah, I know, and that's going to fix critical thinking skills. I don't care if they hang that, but I do care if they spend all their time on it. Continue.
And today, if we teach tech, teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. That is a very famous quote. I'll say it again. If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And that was John Dewey. He's been around for a long time.
I don't know. I'm assuming he's dead. I don't know what year he lived in, but anyway.
The Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's still true.
Very true. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today.
That's like the crop thing I mentioned earlier. It's like the crop thing I mentioned earlier. Education is not and should have never been an assembly line process. It should be a little dirty. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to build things. You got to make mistakes, because you learn with mistakes. We've tried to sanitize it too much to where I still blame that on high stakes testing. I think when you have those tests and you tell people your job depends on the test scores, you're gonna assembly line it, and that's not the way it should go. Anyway, we're way over time.
Way over time. This is Maurie, AI in action, with my husband Jim, talking about artificial intelligence. We post once a week. We have a few things coming up. We're headed to Galveston to do a conference. Going to go to the beach it's a TCA elementary teachers conference. And we're going to be at a district outside of Austin doing some training, and hopefully a couple other districts around here over the summer. We hope that you guys, especially teachers who are now officially out for the summer and working all those second jobs that you have to have over the summer so that you can afford to live, we hope that y'all have a marvelous rest of the week.